Hi, Eric Grant here. This is a common boat seat that folds. There are a ton of them on the market and you can actually buy them finished, but they don't come in a lot of colors. So if you've got one of these and you want to make it match your boat decor, you can make it yourself. If you've got a sewing machine, and if you watch this tutorial video, we're going to show you how to do it.
As you can see, the vinyl cover is still in good shape, but the foam on the seat now bottoms out and it's no longer comfortable, so it's now time to replace it. We will be using a great indoor-outdoor vinyl fabric called EverSoft from Sailrite, and also for the seat bottom a foam called Sailrite Premium, which is a high-density foam which should give us upwards of 12 years of comfort without bottoming out, unlike other low-density foams. Let's get started. The first step is removing the old vinyl fabric from the seat.
First thing we need to do is take apart all the hardware. It is not a bad idea to snap a few pictures of how the hardware was fastened together so that once you take it apart, you can figure out how it was done. This is the seat bottom, and we're going to remove all of the staples around the perimeter and this plastic piece as well with this staple puller. This is a strap to obviously secure the backrest to the bottom. We're going to take this out. The backrest has a hook and loop attachment at the bottom so that the cover can be pulled over the frame and the foam. So I'm going to release that. It'll probably have a few staples in it as well. Yeah, it does. So I'm going to remove these staples here. And we're going to keep all this stuff so that we can kind of repattern it. I'll probably be reusing the backrest foam because usually it is not bottomed out because obviously it doesn't take any weight. Okay, so we have all the staples out, and this is the front. I'm just going to label it front just so I don't get confused. Okay, let's see what that foam looks like. You can see they used a silk film and it's pretty much pushed to the side. And it did have a little bit of a wedge here for your bottom to sit in, but it's totally compressed. That's why we're going to be replacing that foam. Let's take a look at this one. I've got all the staples pulled here. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult to remove since it's so tight. There she is. Keep these old covers. We're going to possibly use them as patterns again. And this one actually looks like the foam's in good shape. As I said, it's got some brown in it, but we're going to use it over again. Since it wasn't being compressed by body weight, it is not bottomed out. And there's the back of it.
Before we move on, I need to tell you at the very end of this tutorial video, we'll show you how you can remove small wrinkles in your finished vinyl project with a heat gun. So don't skip that part of the video. It's at the very end. We're only going to be replacing the foam for the seat bottom. The seat back we're going to reuse.
So I'm going to remove the foam from the base since we're going to replace it. And you can see one of our, I can't remember what these are called, came out. So I'm going to put it back in here because we need those. Okay, and we're going to get some new foam. So I'm going to place this on top of my 2-inch. That's what this one was, 2-inch. Sailrite Premium foam, which is a high density foam, so it'll last for years. And I'm going to mark around it, and notice that I'm making it bigger, and you can tell that my marking is about a 1/2 inch. Now you don't have to be exactly a 1/2 inch, but you just want it to be a little bit bigger than the actual base. Okay, and we're going to cut that out. This is just a hacksaw blade, and you can actually cut foam with a hacksaw blade pretty nicely just by doing this. Make sure you keep the blade upright. That does an okay job. It's a little bit rough. Another way to cut foam is to use the knife that you cut your turkey with for Thanksgiving. And this actually works pretty well. And it's a lot cleaner cut, as you can see here. But since we work at Sailrite and we sell this, this is a Sailrite blade foam saw, and it's awesome. It has a base, so you can always keep it nice and straight.
To create the bucket style, we need to cut wedges. So we're going to show you next how to cut a wedge for the left side and the right side of the seat bottom.
So the bolster, the wedge here for the to conform to your seat bottom is approximately, they're really compressed here, approximately 4.5 inches in width if you go all the way to the side here, 4.5 inches. And the height of them, if you measure it, is on the side about 1 inch, obviously at the highest side. So we're going to do new foam, and to cut those, so I'm going to measure over 4.5 inches, and I'm going to strike a line with my marker there, and then on the side I'm going to measure down 1 inch and strike a line on the foam at 1 inch. I'm having to hold it vertically, but I think I can do it all the way across. Okay, I'm just going to use an electric kitchen knife for this, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to stay on this line, and I'm going to try to stay on this line, and it'll be a little bit rough on one side, but we're going to turn it over when we're done, so watch. Okay, and we're going to do this for both sides of the foam. So you may say, well, this looks kind of rough, but here's what we do. We turn it over, and look how nice it looks like this. And we'll do the same thing with this. Turn it over, flip it around, and this actually makes a beautiful wedge like this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over like this, and I'm going to use the Sailrite spray adhesive for foam and fabric, and we're going to spray this and this where it's going to be adhered. We're going to wait for the glue to tack up a little bit, and then we're going to bond it to their foam. This is an old piece of foam that at Sailrite we always use the scrap foam that we can't sell to you, but this is a Sailrite premium foam. It's a high density foam, so it won't bottom out over time. So let's wait for it to tack up. Okay, when the glue doesn't transfer to your fingers and is tacky, it's ready to bond it. Now what I meant by this is a piece of foam we can't sell you is if it's in the light it gets yellow. It doesn't affect or doesn't damage the foam, it just gets yellow over time, and obviously we're not going to sell that to you. So I'm going to match it up to this edge. We'll be cutting this to match the foam underneath, and we'll do the same thing to this one, and we'll trim it to size after we get it bonded. Nice.
In this chapter, we'll take the old seat cover and separate it and make patterns from it.
So since we have a cover that's in great shape, and basically our new foam matches the size of our old foam and has the same shape and size, we're going to just use the old cover as a pattern for the new cover, which means I'm going to take a seam ripper and I'm going to take it apart and use it as a pattern. Our panel had a center notch from the manufacturer. You can see it there and you can see it there. It would, if yours doesn't, you need to mark before you take it apart where this panel would be put together. So before I ripped it apart, I would mark it basically here, and I'd mark it here, so I know where the center is. But since we have center notches, we're okay. This is EverSoft Pebble. Butterscotch, I believe, is the color. Beautiful backing. It's a great vinyl fabric for indoor and outdoor applications. And this is going to be our center. I'm going to make the center of this tan, and the side I'm going to have a black color called slate. You could do this all out of one color, which is obviously easier. The center for us is going to be 6 inches, so I'm going to make it 7 inches to account for seam allowance, and obviously we just want a strip that is wide enough to be longer than this, and we're going to sew it together, and then we're going to pattern it after it's been sewn together. So I'm just going to strike a line down here, and then I'm going to make a parallel line down here to equal a 7-inch strip. This is definitely long enough. I'm going to pin this boxing in the seam allowance area just because it's fairly long, and that way it doesn't move on me as I lay all this seam allowance down. This is going to be my slate color. Okay, so now that it's pinned down, I'm going to lay the seam allowance down flat, and this is a center mark, so I just mark it there. This is a center mark here. Lay this down flat, and I'll carefully trace around it, making sure that it doesn't move as I go around the whole thing. It does have shape in it, that's why we got to trace around it. You can definitely tell where it was stapled, so we don't want to sew that side, so I'm going to mark down here staple side so we don't get confused. We're going to be sewing it on this side. So now we're going to just cut it out. I probably would have been wiser had I put more fabric at the staple area so that I'd have more to pull on. Hopefully we're going to have enough fabric to pull on the staple side. If not, I'll have to recut this. But I probably should have added 2 extra inches, and then we could have trimmed it.
In this chapter, we're going to show you how to add an additional color to the top plate, giving our seat a gorgeous look.
So we're going to make the top plate, and I've already cut out 2 of the slate colors, and we're going to have a tan in the middle here. It's going to be oversized. We'll cut it to size once we sew in the tan. So let me get the tan piece. So here's my tan, and I'm just going to put this black on top, and we're going to sew this, and then we're going to put this black on top, and we're going to sew this. Okay, we're a 1/2 inch from the edge. We're sewing about a 3 millimeter stitch length, and this is our first stitch of the top stitch. I'm sorry, first stitch of a semi-flat felled seam. We're going to go all the way down to the end. Outside surfaces are facing each other. Then for the other side, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Outside surfaces face each other. We're going to sew down this, and then I'll show you how we do the top stitch. For the top stitch, we can have our seam allowance go to the black side or the tan side. For us, we're going to put the seam allowance in the black side. This is preference. I think it probably would have looked better in the tan side, but for this job, we're putting it in the black side. So the seam allowance is over to the left, and I've switched my stitch length to 6 millimeters, and we're going to use the left side of the center foot as our guide. We're going to do a little bit of back tacking there at the beginning. I'm going to splay the fabric apart left and right as we sew. Make sure you do an accurate job of this because everybody's going to see this stitch. You can feel the seam allowance under here with your finger to make sure you're sewing in the seam allowance. And we're going to sew all the way down to this side and do some reversing at the end, and then we'll do the same thing over here in the black. And this completes our semi-flat felled seam.
Now that we've added that additional color to our top plate and it's oversized, now we'll cut it to size using our old cover as a template.
So I'm folding the material to find the center here, and here's where it is. So I just marked it with a pencil, and we lay it flat. You can see that everything is sewn in nicely. And here's the center of this pattern. I'm going to lay this up as close as I can to the top while still being in the seam area. And then I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to go ahead and pin this just so that I make sure that it's in our seam allowance area, just to make sure it doesn't move. I want extra down here because I'm going to leave extra down here for our stapling, and I'll probably pin it up here as well to make sure that it doesn't move as well in our seam allowance area. So now we want to fold this out and trace around it. And so remember, you've got to get this folded out, and that's kind of why we pinned it, because in doing this it kind of moves around, and we'll just trace all the way around it. At the bottom we're going to leave extra. Okay, we've got that done. I'm going to mark exactly where that center is. We're going to cut it out. There's plenty of extra at the bottom, and we'll trim that after we're done.
The final step for this seat bottom is to sew the boxing to the top plate.
To put a little notch here at the center position so that I don't have to worry about finding it. And then we're going to turn this over, and this is the staple area, so we want to make sure this gets sewn onto it. And I put a notch on that one as well. So this is going to start here, and we're going to sew around this way. Let's take it to the machine. We're going to set our stitch length to about 3 millimeters. We're not going to do a top stitch in this seam, though you can if you want. We're just going to make it easy. So match these up, which should be the center. We're going to sew a 1/2 inch from them, starting at the center, and we're going to put the magnetic guide on just to make this easier. Sorry, my hands are in the way. That's at a 1/2 inch, and we're going to start sewing here, not doing any reversing here, because we're going to start there again when we sew the other direction. And we just want to match up the edges as we sew, following the shape. Pretty easy. And then when we get to the bottom, if you're a little bit off, don't worry about it. We're going to just do some reversing to lock it well in place. Okay, we'll take this out, and then what we're going to do now is we're going to flip it, and we're going to sew with the boxing on the underside, and we're going to start sewing a little bit on top of these stitches by about 1 inch or so, making sure that we're sewing right into the previous stitches, right like that, and we'll sew like this. It's pretty easy, same process. All right, you get the idea. When we sewed this side, we're off down here, but remember we left this extra long, so don't be alarmed at that. Now you see all these wrinkles? That's because we had to take a turn. When you turn this right side out and your seam allowance goes on the inside, those wrinkles can actually cause a little bit of wrinkles on your foam. So what you can do, if you're not going to sew a top stitch, or even if you're going to sew a top stitch, is you can cut little triangles out, and that will allow those wrinkles to basically come out. Everywhere there's a wrinkle, you may want to do that, and that'll allow that to sit up against your foam a little bit nicer. So that's up to you.
Let's set the seat bottom aside that we just made, and we'll concentrate on the backrest cover. Let's separate the old cover panel so we can make patterns from it.
For the backrest, we're going to use the foam since it's not compressed much, and the backer obviously. So we're going to take apart the old one as a pattern for the new. And what I've done is I've marked it with an A and a A here and a B and a B, so I know I don't get confused with the panels. And notice that they've stopped sewing here, so I've labeled it stop sewing and stop sewing. So now we're going to take it apart with the seam ripper, and we're going to be using this as a pattern. So we've got everything apart. We're going to use this as the back, and this is going to be our black color or slate color. This is going to be slate. This is going to be black on the two sides, and we're going to have tan in the middle, matching our bottom seat.
Like we did with the seat bottom, we're going to add an additional color to the top plate for the backrest.
Our bottom seat has this tan, and this is the back side, so we want it to be the same size here. And then we're actually going to have it come up to a little bit of a peak here. So it's now time to take these and pattern our fabric with our old panels, because we're going to use the old foam. So we cut our tan piece with a little bit of a arrowhead up here. It could be straight if you'd like, and it is big enough that we can cover for our seam allowance for this, so it matches at the bottom here. And we also cut black pieces that are oversized. Once these are sewn together, then we're going to pattern it off of this. So these sides are cut perfectly straight, and we'll take it over to the sewing machine and we'll sew these onto this panel. Outside surfaces are facing each other. I'm sewing about a 3mm stitch length for this first stitch. We're going to do a top stitch as well. Just sew a 1/2 inch down this edge and all the way to the end, and do a little bit of reversing when you reach the end. My seam allowance is going to be folded over to the black side, so I'm going to fold it over that way and make sure that I sew into it for my top stitch, and we're going to just use the center foot, the left side, as a guide, and we're going to pull the panel apart as we go, and I'm sewing a 6mm stitch length for the top stitch. And we're going to sew down this side all the way to the bottom and do reversing, and then we're going to do the same thing over here as well.
Now we can pattern this top plate. We also have to add a little hem at the bottom for our loop.
So I folded this old pattern in half, and I marked where the center is with a pin, and I did the same thing down here. I marked the center with a pin. And I've got this upside down, and I marked the center with a pin, and then I marked exactly where this is 6 inches, which matches exactly where this would be from seam to seam, so that it's just going to be the same. And if we put this on so that it's centered like that, and where's that mark right there? Let me put that mark on the top so you can see it. That's actually the center here. And we want to have some extra because we want the hem down here so we don't see a raw edge with the hook and loop. So we definitely have extra here. And our 6 inches is going to be up here where it's going to be visible, which is nice, above the hook and loop. So we're perfect right there. Now what we want to do is we want to splay this out so that we have plenty of material. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically mark it with dashes with it splayed out, and I'm going to hold this down nice and tight, making sure that it's flat as we mark around it. Okay, so make sure that you fold it out so you're getting the full pattern as you go. Okay, mark all the way around. So we don't want to cut this away, but we want the fold to be here. So I'm going to mark this, and I'm going to mark fold. And I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to mark fold. So I'm going to come down 1 inch from our fold, approximately, which, can I get 1 inch? I can't quite get 1 inch, so I'm going to go 3/4 inch, which should be sufficient, and mark a line down here. This will be my cut line, so I can create a hem. And now I'm going to cut basically to each one of those dashes all the way around. I am not adding any seam allowance because this is actually calculated for seam allowance already. And we're going to cut right here all the way around.
Onto the top plate's bottom edge, we're going to sew a loop fastener.
So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because I'm going to fold on this point, I'm going to measure that's 3/4 inch, I can tell there. So I'm going to measure up 3/4 from that so I can fold to that line. So I'm putting this right on those dash marks. 3/4 inch is right there. And I'm going to strike a line here. This will just make it easier for me to fold it up to that point. And I'm going to use a seam stick for canvas. This is a 1/4 inch. And it just makes the job much easier because it holds everything together. And then we'll peel off the transfer paper, and I will fold this up to that line, and you notice that we're right on the fold mark, which is great. Now we have a finished edge. We'll take our loop that I've already cut to size. This is our loop side, not our hook side, and this is 1 inch. And put double-sided tape on it, and we'll baste it right over top of that hem, and we can go all the way to the edges too, like that. And we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew the loop in place. I'm going to sew it with the loop down just because the stitch always looks better on the top side. We're close to that edge, and I'm going to just sew. Let's see, I'm going to move my needle to the right, and I'm going to do a little bit of reversing here. sew down this side, all the way down. And then we're going to sew the opposite edge, and I'll probably do that from the underside just because I want to make sure I hit my loop. I'm going to do reversing here. Okay, nice. And we'll flip it over and we'll sew right here in the same process.
And in this chapter, we're going to use the old cover to create the back plate and the boxing.
This is our back panel, and it doesn't have a hem here. It has a hook on it, so we're going to put it on without a hem, and we're going to trace around it with outside surfaces down. This is our black panel, and we're going to trace around it and cut it out and sew on our hook in the same manner. It does stick to this, and we'll show you what's next after this. Okay, with this piece, I pinned it here in the seam allowance and here in the seam allowance just to help hold it down because it's really thin. And I'm going to go ahead and lay the seam allowance down and trace around it like this all the way around. And pinning it will help me just keep its position. Okay, we're going to go all the way around laying down the seam allowance, and then we'll cut this out. Okay, I'm going to mark this as A and this is B down here, just as it was marked here. Now make sure the outside surface is down, and the outside surface is this was down, and now we're going to cut it out.
After this boxing's been cut out, we're going to take it to our sewing machine along with the top plate, and we'll start sewing from the center position out. Then we'll flip it and sew the opposite direction.
We didn't show it on the table, but this is where we're supposed to stop sewing, so I marked where we're supposed to stop sewing on both ends of this boxing. Okay, so now we have our top plate, and it's labeled A here. So A is over here, so outside surfaces would face each other, and this is the center point and that's the center point. So they would go on just like that, and we'd start sewing from the center point, a 1/2 inch from the needle. The needle should be in the center position, so we sew a 1/2 inch from that, and we can start right there at the center or close to the center. And I'm going to use a magnetic guide. I'm also going to reduce my stitch to about 3 millimeters because I'm not going to do a top stitch on this, and I want it to be fairly strong. So let's start sewing. We're going to just match up the edge as we sew. And once we sewed down to the bottom edge, we're going to turn it over and sew the other edge in the same manner. And then when we get to the end, we'll do some reversing here. Okay. Now we're going to flip this over, and we're going to sew this direction. Same process. Sew a little bit on top of our previous stitches, right like that, directly on top of them, and sew this direction, matching up the edges.
Next, we'll grab the back plate and we'll sew it to that assembly that we just sewed.
Okay, now this is the back piece, and it's going to go on so outside surfaces are facing each other. We have the B and the B, and we're going to center those marks on top of each other, and we'll start sewing in the same manner.
I don't like the way you properly labor this.
When you make adjustments, just make sure you're not sewing into anything that you don't, this part at all. So bury your needle when you make adjustments. Pretty easy. Now when we get to the stop point right here, where it says stop, we're going to do some reversing there and not sew any further. And right here, we'll do some reversing. Make sure you do some good reversing because it's going to come under a lot of stress. We're going to turn it over and do sew the other side in the same manner.
Now here comes the fun part. We're going to pull the backrest cover onto the foam and the backer.
I took the old plastic off of this. This is silk film available from Sailrite. It's center folded, so I unfolded it. And we're going to wrap it because without this, it's nearly impossible to get this to put it over the foam because it's so abrasive, is what I probably should call it. So we're going to wrap this around, overlap it, and now it's ready to be placed on there. So we're going to take this assembly and we're going to turn it right side out and push the corners out. Okay, now we're going to insert this. See how nice that silk film works. Now we will have to use some staples here because this one has to be stapled to this bottom of the backer board. Now your seam allowance, if you'd like to, you can get the seam allowance to lay on one side. That's the kind of the nice thing about a top stitch. It makes the seam allowance lay on one direction, but we didn't sew it in. You don't have to be picky about that if you don't want. What we want is we want this seam to be centered, and we want to push this fabric down, and we want this hook and loop to basically be on this edge here. And once it's centered, we want to take our stapler and we want to put a staple like that and then pull it down taut. Put another one and put one here, pull it taut. Now let's work this other direction. See, that tightens it up nicely. Okay, we're going to go all the way to the edge doing this. Okay, so now on the side, what we want to do is we want to take this over. This is the raw edge, and pull it down, and just put one staple there to keep this kind of on the edge. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. And then this one, we are going to basically just have that come up here, or you can cut that off. Let's just do this over here. Okay, before we do anything else, we want to pull this down. Now, remember, this is old foam, but we want to pull this down as far as we can and basically hook it down here. And the nice thing is, if you don't like it, you can always redo it again. Put that silk film down there. And that closes it up nicely. That's pretty good looking. And this will get folded like this, and it's going to get covered by our hardware, so it really won't be visible. If you'd like, you could put a staple in there, but I'm not going to worry about it. You could trim that away. Hardware is going to cover it. And we could trim that loop away, but hardware is going to cover that as well. So that is our backrest, which really does look pretty good for having old foam in it. Nice. Here's what I mean by the hardware covers it. The hardware goes on just like that. So that covers all of that spot. You don't even see that. Nice. Now the best way to find the holes is to actually take the hardware, and you can see where the old seat was, and you position it basically in that same spot, and you can tell approximately where those holes were, and take an awl and kind of punch through. Do the bottom one first. That way, if you punch in the wrong spot, you won't see that. And I can sometimes feel in the backer board where that hole is, like right there. That's the hole. So then once I find the bottom hole, then I can position this one over the top, and then I can go up to the top one, and there I have the top hole. So once those are determined, now I can drive my screws right through those, and we can secure the hardware.
Now we're going to staple the seat cover over the foam in the backer.
Okay, we're going to put our foam on the backer board, or backer plastic in this situation, make sure that it's centered everywhere. And then we're going to put the silk film on top, because if you try to pull the vinyl over the foam, it's very abrasive and doesn't pull over well. This is a centerfold silk film, so I'm going to try to find the fold, and I'm going to unfold it, splay it out. There we go. And then I'm just going to put it over top of the foam and kind of have it wrap around to the back side. It's also a water barrier as well, just like that. And then I'm going to take my fabric that's been turned right side out, make sure the front is in front, and we're going to pull it over the top. And then we have to turn it over, obviously, and start stapling it in place. And pull it to the back side. Let's get the silk film back here. Probably going to cut some of that silk film away because it's just going to get in the way of things. I think I will have enough to pull through, so that's good. I'm going to cut some of this out of the way, just so it's not something I have to deal with. So I found the center of my panel here and put a notch here, and I put a notch there. This already had a notch in it. And I'm going to start here at the back, and I'm going to pull nice and tight. We know where the center of the backer board is, obviously, by this ridge here. And so I'm going to put a preliminary staple in here, a couple staples in here, and they can be removed if I don't like what I've got. I'm going to go like that and like that, maybe a third one just to make sure that nothing pulls out. And then I'm going to come to the front, and I know that I'm centered if I stay on this ridge here, and I'm going to pull fairly taut here, and I'm going to put a few staples in here, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, we're fairly tight right there, so we still have wrinkles in it, but we're going to be able to pull those out as we tension it. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. When we pull these out, that'll pull this all out to the side. So let's keep going. Let's go over here and work this direction, and I'll put one right here. And then we're going to go over here and do the same thing. Sometimes I put my hand over here and I work the vinyl over here, and I want to pull it. And then we want to turn it over. We want to look to see what we have. It's tight from here to here, which is good. We'll be able to pull that way. That's good. And we're going to keep doing this until we get out to about here. We're going to stop, and here we're going to stop. So let's keep doing that here, and then we'll do it here until we get to that vicinity, and I'll show you what's next. We have it stapled to here, to here. We turn it over. It's tight this direction. We have a bump here, but if I do this, see how that comes out? So what we're going to do now is we're going to concentrate on this area. So I'm going to pull it taut here, and I'm going to put a staple, two staples here. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pull it taut here. We start with two, because if we don't like it, we can remove them. Yeah, it's coming along here. And then we're going to work our way, going obviously this way, dut dut, dut dut, dut dut, dut dut, just like that. So this is what she looks like now. It's nice and tensioned well. This is the front, and these are the front corners. We've come stapled all the way up to here. What we're going to do here, the front looks good here. What we're going to do here is we're going to splay this out. We're going to get the wrinkle on the back side, which it already is, and we're going to just sandwich this out. And I'm going to put a staple here, here, and here. And that's a pretty good way to finish the corner. And we'll do the same thing over here. Now over here, the back side, this is not going to be visible. It's really going to be in the hardware, but it's got a little bit of a more of a bulk to it. Now we can work this out a little bit better. Basically, if I want to do anything, I want to get the bulk in the corner because the hardware is going to hide that. What I mean by that is this hardware is going to be over top of that like that, and you won't see that at all. So, but let's work this out best as we can. So I'm going to come like that, and I'm probably going to cut some of that out. We're going to put a staple there. So once I have that in position, I'm going to take out the bulk by taking out this triangle piece like that on this side, and then we're going to take out the triangle piece on this side, and that gives me a little tail so that I can staple that down, and then I can pull on that. And I'm going to take out a little bit of this too, down to the base. Just get rid of the bulk, get rid of the bulk. Go away, plastic. Like that. And there's what she'll look like. Pretty nice. Okay, to put the hardware back on, basically you just want to find approximately where the hole should be. You can usually feel a ridge where that is, and then I like to just take an awl and I like to find, yeah, right there. The awl goes through the hole pretty easily, and that way I know exactly where the first hole is, and then I can drive my screw through that, and obviously I can find the other holes based on that. So use an awl, and then we can screw it in. And you can see that I painted the bracket black so that it looks a lot better. And I believe there's a screw there and a screw there. And we'll do the same thing with this side. So I was looking for a wrinkle anywhere in the vinyl because you can use a heat gun and you can sometimes work out the wrinkles. And unfortunately, I don't have hardly any wrinkles anywhere. The only thing that I see slightly is a little bit of looseness here. So I don't have much to work with as far as an example of a wrinkle. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to work this looseness out with a heat gun to show you how it works. So let's show you how this can work. So I'm going to use a heat gun. You have to be careful because you can damage the vinyl if you get it too hot. So I usually use my hand and I feel the vinyl to make sure it's not getting to the point where I can't hardly touch it. And I usually try to have a wet rag available. So when I get it actually worked in, see, you can see already that it's the looseness is almost disappearing. And now I can hardly touch the vinyl, so I'm going to move the heat gun away, and then I like to touch it with the wet rag to kind of cool it off immediately. And that looseness and the wrinkle that was there, a little bit of a wrinkle, is basically gone. So you can use a heat gun to work some of the wrinkles out. Just be careful you don't hurt your vinyl and do it too much.
Check out the full materials and tools list in the description below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe and click the bell to be notified of new tutorial videos when they become available. Currently, we are trying to reach 500,000 subscribers. We'd appreciate your help. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.